Hello, and welcome to Making Sense of It. I am Mona Duncan, your moderator, and this program is our gift to you from the Glasser Institute for Choice Theory. Each week we have a certified member of the Glasser Institute to present something about Dr. Glasser's theory and therapy and how it applies to their life. And today we're going to be doing a rebroadcast of a Canada, Lynn Sumida, who is faculty with the Canada Glasser Institute. And she is going to be sharing with us the evolution in understanding total behavior. And Lynn became faculty with the Glasser Institute in 1981. And I just absolutely love everything that she does. And I'm going to share the screen and bring this up and let Lynn take it away.
Well, I'm one of those people that was blessed to really know what I wanted to do in terms of working with people. And so the evolution of getting trained as a master's degree, learning and meeting Dr. Glasser made a huge difference. And so, you know, today's presentation is really a retrospect look back on what I've learned. Because in the very early days, we learned about choice theory, and it was called control theory, which you will recognize, some of you, for those days. And then the switch from control theory to choice theory was really a strategic choice, I think, for Dr. Glasser to say he wanted to point to where people had choice in their life. Yes, we're an internal control system. And we're going to delve more deeply into that because it's really relevant to the topic today of how we look at and understand total behavior. So moving along, we had the original ideas and the training and so on. And then more information came out about the brain and how we operate and other factors like energy and resonance and consciousness. Oh, good. Victoria is able to join us. Oh, welcome, Victoria. I'm so glad you could make it. I've just barely started.
Okay.
So you received, I hope, the handout. I'm going to screen share it as well, but if you've got it, you can refer to that because this document, first and foremost, is something I made up. So please don't look at it as truth. But look at it as some ideas that we're going to explore. And so let me just take a moment here, and I think I can screen share. No, you need to let me screen share, Andrea, please.
Okay, let me hear what I can do. Okay, try now.
Thank you. There we go. Now we've got a document right here. There we go. So I titled it The Evolution in Understanding Total Behavior. So what I'd like to do today is we're going to talk about each of the levels. We'll maybe do level 1 and 2 and then move into a little bit of conversation. What's resonating for you, what's familiar, different, and then look at level 3, which is what I'm calling the deep end of the swimming pool. So we get into some different ideas. So as we look at level 1, this comes from my sort of beginning understanding of the concept of total behavior. So here we've got that all 4 components of action, thinking, feeling, physiology, they all work together. And they operate as an integrated whole, which I think most of us would be pretty comfortable with that idea. And that if you change one component, it's going to shift all the others. And that was brilliant for me, especially when I would have people coming from different disciplines, and maybe they were body workers Or maybe they had a lot of practice in terms of behavior modification. Back in the late 70s, that was popular. It was easy to say, well, if you change the action, it's going to change the thinking, the feeling, the physiology. We could just work beautifully with that. And of course, because we have the most control over actions and thinking, that's where we start in terms of interventions often, because it's the easiest place to work with people. And so choice is presented in the sense we're focusing a lot more on actions and thoughts. What people are choosing to do, what are the thinking patterns, and so on, which is where we're going to expand as we go into level 2. The last piece I realized in that beginning time of my learning and growth was really the brain was kind of viewed just as a mechanism. Like we weren't going into brain science. In fact, the chart that Dr. Glasser developed that Wendell just held up a few minutes ago, sometimes called the blue chart, even though he labeled it the brain, he's really talking about how the mind works. Because he's not going into, neurons and neural pathways and brain plasticity, none of that. So the focus there in that first level, I think, is really embracing self-responsibility. What can I take ownership for? What can I take charge of in terms of actions and thinking? Now, what's really interesting is if we look at the back wheels of the car as we speak, the feelings and the physiology. Most of us, I think, would present that in terms of the back wheels follow the front wheels. So based on how I'm thinking, I'm going to generate the feelings that go with thoughts and the physiology. And that's absolutely true in a basic kind of ABC way. Where it gets more interesting is what happens when neural pathways are already grooved? Okay, do actions and thoughts always lead? And that question started me thinking about what's really going on in the system. And so that takes us over into level 2. And I'll just scroll up there. So level 2, in my thinking, I started to realize, well, total behavior isn't just about behavior or the 4 components or how they work. Total behavior is an entire system. We are a total behavior system. Just let that sink in for you. We are a total behavior system. Everything is integrated. So now what's going on in the brain is really relevant, isn't it? And what's going on in the body is really relevant to the total behavior system. Well, that opens up all sorts of things, doesn't it? So as we think about neurology, once a neural pathway is grooved, it's like a superhighway. It can run very fast, very effortlessly. It doesn't take conscious thought to run that pattern. And so, as Andrea said in my bio, I started working a lot with trauma. And I'll never forget this woman who came in the very early days, because in the late 70s, a lot of people were coming forward with disclosures of abuse. And I was a young social worker with no training in trauma and healing per se. And so my belief was, well, if somebody's had a traumatic experience, if they are listened to and honored and respected, that should be kind of enough, don't you think? That should have done the healing. And of course, that was ridiculous. Certainly being heard and not told that you're making it up or just creating a problem or whatever. Yes, being heard and listened to is important, but it wasn't the magic pill for healing. And so how do you help people heal? So it was really like being thrown into the deep end of the swimming pool in terms of trauma. And this woman came in one day and she was very upset. And I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she said, oh my God, Lynn, it's the leaves. And I said, what do you mean, the leaves? She said, can't you smell the leaves? It's the smell of the leaves. And in the fall, the smell of many leaves on the ground is very distinctive. Well, for her, it was absolutely hardwired in to her experience of being pushed down into the leaves and sexually abused, assaulted. She was not thinking. She walked out the door with no thought of that past trauma. And all of a sudden she smelled that smell and the entire experience was back right there and running through her system. And so understanding that once neural pathways are grooved, it's like the back wheels of the car do run it. It's not just occasionally, they can absolutely run the system. So that opened up a lot of really interesting exploration and research and whatnot. What do we do when those neural pathways are grooved? What do we do if somebody has a pattern of obsessive compulsive behaviors and anytime they feel anxious, they need to do those behaviors that soothe the system? They're running loops without conscious thought. And so here it becomes really important how we approach that idea of choice. It's not quite like you can say to somebody, you're choosing to think this or that, when that's already running. And another really amazing example that they're now looking into extensively is pornography. We have an epidemic of people that are addicted to pornography. And so there's been people studying what's happening in the brain, and the dopamine and the chemicals that are released with pornography. And the whole idea they now believe is that these are addictive loops. The person is running that addictive loop and they never stop wanting. So this takes us into a concept of a positive feedback loop. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but in other times we've talked about the whole idea of the internal control system is what Dr. Glasser called a negative feedback loop. What that really means, to my understanding, is when we get a match for what we want, if metaphorically we use a thermostat, for example, if I set it for 70 and the thermostat, the temperature gets to 70, what does the furnace or the air conditioning do? It goes into sleep mode, it stops, it gets a match. That's called a negative feedback loop, meaning when you get the match, you can stop. And the next thing you want goes on the scale and we start behaving again. We are a negative feedback loop. Well, here's the difference. Positive feedback loop, you get what you want and you want more. You get what you want more. You get a match and you keep going. And positive feedback loops are destructive. Many times they will end in death, in destruction, because there isn't an end point. So I'm not a specialist in pornography work and that type of addiction, but I've researched it because of clients coming in, and what they recommend is you need stopping. You need abstinence. You have to break the cycle because the system doesn't stop working. All right, let's go a little bit further down here. So as I pointed out, telling a person they have a choice if they're in that chemical loop is unhelpful and I think hurtful. Helping people understand what's happening in their brain is incredible. Now, I brought in this next point. We were speaking a little earlier before we started about Dr. Joe Dispenza. One of his books, he titled Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Now, what is he pointing to? Well, this is where this whole idea of how we form our identity, what happens when we have traumas and we build that into our identity? Well, it becomes part of who we think we are sometimes. So I came through the era of people just, feeling that the best way to introduce themselves was as a survivor. And there were all the survivor groups that started up where people could claim their experience, but notice how it's framed. I'm a survivor. I'm a this. That tells you they've locked it into their identity, the I am. Now, when we do that, then we start building identity around trauma or around addictions. I'm an alcoholic. There's power in doing that because it keeps it very focused, but there's a downside. So when Dr. Dispenza's saying, we need to break the habit of being ourselves, what is he pointing to? What habit or pattern of thinking is he talking about? So this was a very interesting idea for me because we get attached, we form habits and links. So I want to talk just about how some of this patterning works, just using my NLP background, but I want to pop out of this screen share. We know patterns form by linking things, and that's very efficient in the brain. We want to link things, and it makes it easy. So if you think of walking, do you consciously think about how you walk each step? If you're able, most people don't think about it. But does anybody know someone or been a person who needed to relearn to walk? Yeah. How hard is it, Wendell?
Well, starting from baby steps.
Yes.
Yeah.
How much thinking needs to go in? Huge amount, isn't it? So here we have what we call organized behavior of walking, and we can do it unconsciously virtually. And yet when we lose that ability through surgery or an accident, and we have to relearn it, we really get in touch with all the thinking that goes in to building those patterns. When you watch a baby, oh my gosh, all the behavior to try and make that pattern of walking happen. And the system reorganizing right before your eyes, really, of creating and adapting and adjusting and trying and doing. So very interesting. But if I said to you, what things in your brain have you got linked? Can you think of anything that you would say X is Y is linked with Y? Anything come to mind? Well, for some people, morning and coffee are absolutely linked. In the old days, like they will tell you, I can't think until I've had my coffee. Don't ask me a question until I've had my coffee. In the old days, smokers would say, coffee and cigarettes, they're a package deal. When I walk into a movie theater, I have popcorn linked with movies. I could have had a 3-course meal and I walk in and my brain goes, popcorn. It has nothing to do with hunger, everything to do with what I put together in my brain. So it's powerful for us to just feel how simple and ordinary. But if you work with people, say couples who have conflict, and if one of the places they fight is the bedroom will get anchored as a place of conflict. That's not a good thing. And some of you will know that adage, never go to bed mad. There's a lot of wisdom to that because what it's saying is don't take that into the bedroom and into the next day. Any comments, questions on that? How's that sitting for you?
Yep.
Seems pretty clear. So now let's go to breaking the habit of being yourself. I think he's talking about the patterns of thinking about ourselves. What habitual thoughts do you have about yourself that would be good to break? Yeah, anything coming to mind? Because we all have them. People will say, I'm not good with mechanics or technology. That's a habit, a pattern of thinking they've said many times often. It's a way of thinking about themselves. Is it serving? Is it helpful? Anybody else think of a habitual thought that doesn't really help you? Anything come to mind?
And I go to, and I,
Sure, go ahead, Aunt Wendell.
yeah, let's go, okay. When I go to seminars and workshops, okay, we're taking a break. And I head straight for the soft drink machine.
Yes.
It's a break. Get a drink.
Yes,
Not thirsty, just they're
exactly. So you're running a pattern, a way of thinking. You've linked breaks with a certain kind of beverage. Yeah, exactly. And people will feel very deprived sometimes if all they get is water at a break. And yet the body, that's the one beverage the body wants. Yeah. Susan, any pattern comes to mind for you?
I've linked tiredness and boredom with food.
Yes, exactly. And do you have some beliefs about yourself in relation to food?
I should be able to control it, but I know that if I have the food and I'm tired, I'm going to have more energy, even though it doesn't give it to me. But it's my belief about food.
That's right, exactly. It's your belief about food and your belief about yourself, which has some flavor of, I'm not good at managing my food or regulating myself.
Mm.
Yeah. Vicky, do you have
So
one?
Lynn,
Yeah.
as soon as she said food, I don't know why this connection happened, but I go to Texas Roadhouse for a ribeye and mashed potatoes. I don't care what else is at Texas Roadhouse. It's all the time.
That's right. So we begin to see how habitual our behaviors are, our patterns, whether it's what we eat, how we eat, when we eat, et cetera, all of those are running to a great extent without conscious focus. We're not paying attention. And yet we're running our lives without realizing, therefore, how we're creating our life, creating reality. So this is a much deeper understanding, isn't it, of quality world than what we probably learned in the beginning, or maybe even how we've taught it. The whole belief system. And I will say to people sometimes, are you in your own quality world? And people will think, well, yeah, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm married. They have themselves in their quality world based on roles, capabilities, skills, job, profession, responsibilities, even physical, if they're a runner or an athlete or this or that. But what happens if those things get taken away? Who are you if you're no longer a mother or married? Who are you if your body changes and you lose a limb or a breast? You begin to see the power of identity when it's attached to externals. There's a real vulnerability because those can all be lost. And those are really powerful moments for people of what is really true for you at the deepest core level of who you are. So my colleague, Jeff Brown, lost his son a year ago, 21-year-old son, to an accidental drug overdose. He had no intentions of dying. And that happened in June. And in December, Jeff and I were reviewing the year. And he said to me, without a word of a lie, this was the most amazing year I can remember. That in the midst, he lost his 21-year-old son. Was that denial? No. He went through excruciating pain to the other side of amazing joy and allowed himself to grow and evolve through that experience. So it really points to what we actually can do with ourselves and what we can do with healing, whether it's emotional healing or physical healing. So there we go. So as we look at level 2, what I've said is the goal, I think, of when we really look at how we function is to move beyond surviving to thriving. You don't need to be a trauma survivor for that issue. Are we thriving in our life? Is the real question. So now I'm not seeing Andrea. I'm not sure what's happened to her. So what I'm going to suggest is that we will maybe stay, because I don't think I can do breakout rooms. Well, I could. Here's the question.
Okay, we're going to stop sharing here. There is more, and we will do that next week, where she talks about level 3, and it is absolutely fantastic. So please set your time and be on time, and we will listen to Lynn Sumida go with level 3 on total behavior. In the meantime, many blessings and good mental health.